back for some NBA Finals talk, but first we'll go over some of the playoff stuff that we hadn't talked about in a couple weeks because I think our last video was after the first round, so the second round preview. So some of the teams that went out in the second round, first we had Denver. They went out in 4.
They got as far as they could get this season. There doesn't really seem to be a whole lot to talk about with them. Jokic looks like Jokic top 5
the 30,
player.
20, and 10 game. Too much Austin Rivers.
And Aaron Gordon and Facu Campazzo. They didn't have enough depth on their roster to overcome the Jamal Murray injury.
Yeah, still would have liked them to get a game, but then the referees had the game where they tossed Jokic out for the flagrant 2. A little excessive, but yeah, the Suns and 4 guy, his prediction came true.
I think the biggest issue the Nuggets have to deal with is their coaching. Because to let Chris Paul spend 4 consecutive games in a row getting to shoot the same shot, the shot that he has made his signature over the last 15 years, it's just malpractice as a coach. And I think they probably won't fire him because he'll have the injury excuse, but they could really use an upgrade to the head coach, in my opinion.
Unfortunately, all the new coaches already started to get hired, so we both agreed last time that if they lost that series and got dominated, he should get fired, but he'll use the excuse injury to get him through to another season, and maybe next year if they don't take a step up, he'll probably lose his job. But with Jamal Murray coming back later into the season, that'll probably get into.
When did Jamal Murray get hurt?
So he got hurt. Jokic played 20 games without him, so he probably got hurt
in March-ish?
March, early April. So he could be back, but he'll probably be back late.
I think All-Star break next year.
So that's it for Denver. Jokic won't be playing in the Olympics this year. That's a shame.
Disappointing, definitely.
I don't think they have any other Olympic players on their team, especially not. Aaron Gordon was pretty terrible in that series.
Aaron Gordon, like we saw with Andre Drummond, Aaron Gordon was who he was. It was just he was able to put up better numbers on a bad team like Orlando. But when he went to a team that had actual playoff aspirations and went up against playoff defenses, it was clear that he's just a guy. He's not any missing piece to anybody's championship roster.
Yeah, that's it for Denver season. So next we had the Clippers knocking out the 1 seed without Kawhi Leonard for the second half of the series. That's a tough loss for Utah, and they've got some questions coming up. Mike Conley is going to be a free agent, and they don't have any cap space to sign anybody outward, so they'll probably have to re-sign him.
Utah, this is Utah's team right now. Like Rudy Gobert's making his $200 million. Donovan's about to sign. He already signed his second max already. They're gonna have to re-sign Conley. They got Clarkson under contract, so this is the team they're rolling out with. But the reason why the Utah Jazz are not still playing, or at least made the conference finals, is because of Quinn Snyder's stubbornness. Like, it would have been... We all saw that Rudy Gobert could not be on the floor against the small ball Clippers lineup. And yet, Rudy Gobert continued to play 40, 45-plus minutes every single night, continued to have a negative 20 plus and minus on a nightly basis, and yet they continued to play him. They allowed Terrence Mann to have a career night because they just simply refused to guard him, and they got deservedly sent home in one of the most shocking fashions we've ever seen.
The Terrence Mann game. Really, Terrence Mann will probably never do that again. I think they got caught by a bad circumstance. The small ball lineup, Rudy Gobert's been played off the court 3 straight playoffs now, but for the Clippers to do it without Kawhi Leonard is pretty damning. Quinn Snyder's a good coach. He's not I think he's a better coach than Mike Malone or the Terry Stotts of the world.
He looks more like Budenholzer,
who is going to the finals this year. But if things break right, they don't have the roster that's going to break right. They're kind of stuck. Donovan Mitchell is up for his contract extension actually this offseason.
Okay. All right.
So he'll be restricted free agent.
Well, he'll probably sign his max contract deal. I'd be surprised if he didn't re-up for at least his second contract. But I think the question is, what do you do about Rudy? Do you just keep Rudy? I'm sure there's another NBA team that's willing to give up a good piece for Rudy Gobert that could possibly make their team just fit better. But I don't know how much you can keep relying on Rudy Gobert. It shows in the playoffs he can't help you.
I think the only reason that he can't help you is because they don't have any wing defenders. So their best defender is still Rudy Gobert. They're going to need to get a wing guy that can defend. And Bogdanovich is good, but he can't really guard nobody. He was healthy this year and had a good season. Joe Ingles has tailed off since that Oklahoma City series years ago when he looked like he could be a solid role player. He's just a good role player now.
He was older, he was like 30 something, but when he first started eating up Paul George, so then that was a few years ago now.
Their second most effective player might be Jordan Clarkson, and his game is not very
mercenary. Effective. Get out there and shoot the ball as much as you can.
So I mean, they're kind of stuck. They should be looking to blow it up, but these teams refuse to blow it up. There's going to be a lot of teams that should blow it up, so maybe they make some trades. But can you get a Rudy Gobert, Mike Conley package and get Damian Lillard? Can you get a Bradley Beal? Does he even fit? Like, I don't really know what they need.
They gotta find a wing. They gotta find a wing, and I would give up Rudy to get one, but no one's giving up a wing.
No one's giving up a wing to get. There aren't wings available that people are going to trade Rudy Gobert for unless they want to get a Ben Simmons.
I was thinking that, but Joel Embiid, they wouldn't do that. That makes no sense.
So maybe a 3-team trade.
Here's one. Would Boston be willing to give one of their guys for Rudy Gobert?
That would fit. I just don't know with their new coach. I mean, they've already got rid of Kemba. They tossed him out already.
Would you give up Jaylen Brown for Rudy Gobert? Or
I think one of those. I think Jaylen Brown will probably be on the trade block this year because I just don't. I think Boston does see that they have too much of the same thing, and that's kind of the problem with a lot of these teams. They have either a lot of guards, a lot of guard depth, a lot of wing depth, a lot of big depth, but nobody's really well rounded anymore like that.
I'd give up Brown for Gobert and Conley, or some combination of that to maybe get them a guard and a big.
Smart and Brown for Conley and Gobert to match the contracts.
I think that makes both of those teams better teams. Now I don't know how you would get all the work out, but I think I'll do like that.
I'll leave it for the GMs to figure out how to finesse around all the cap situations.
But Utah's gonna have to decide: are they happy with just being a first, second round playoff team, or are they willing to either try to bottom out or make the big move to try to swing for the fences? But right now, as the team is constructed, they can't win a title, and they're gonna have to figure out a way to get around that.
But yeah, that's team one. So I guess Rudy Gobert will be one of the candidates on the trade block this year that people will be looking to get their hands on. So that's it for the west side of the second round. On the east side, we had the Philadelphia 76ers gagging it up again.
Unsurprisingly, a Doc Rivers special.
They tanked for all those years, and they still have not made it to the conference finals since 2001 in the Allen Iverson era.
Shock. And they've been Game 7s 3 different times with chances to make it.
2 times. I think
times.
the time that Boston just beat them. I thought Boston just beat them.
I think Boston did just beat them like
5 or 6, yeah. So, I mean, that's tough. That leads us to candidate number 2. Ben Simmons will probably be on the trade block.
It's just I don't know. Ben Simmons feels like he should have more value than what he probably has.
He might be down right now, but I still think they could get a good player, like a Sabonis level player, for Ben Simmons.
Well, you've had the standpoint that you think they should trade Joel Embiid.
I believe they should trade.
Why should they trade Joel Embiid and build a team around Ben Simmons?
Because Ben Simmons has a higher ceiling. When Joel Embiid doesn't play, Ben Simmons, what did he do? He dropped a 40-point game on Rudy Gobert. They just don't fit together. As long as Ben Simmons isn't a shooter and nothing shows you that he's going to be Steph Curry anytime soon, you're going to need to play with 4 real shooters. It's not Joel Embiid, who is forced to become a shooter. So I would trade Joel Embiid because he's also injury prone. I think his career, you might get 2 more max years out of Joel Embiid before he goes the route of DeMarcus Cousins, where it's like, oh, my body just breaks down. The route of Kristaps Porzingis, oh yeah, my body just broke down because I'm big and freakishly sized and athletic. Try to be freakishly athletic with that. So I don't know how much more prime years you have of Embiid. If they were to trade Embiid, he's actually peaked right now in value, and they could do what they should have did last year when Simmons was peaked in value and trade him. Now this year they could trade Embiid and probably get a Damian. You probably could get a Damian Lillard from Joel Embiid. You probably could get a Rudy Gobert plus. Maybe you can even get a Donovan Mitchell if you give a Joel Embiid in a 3-team trade to work around getting Gobert out of the door and getting Embiid. I'd like to see Quinn Snyder with an offensive center to see what he could do with his coaching. Maybe you could get who else will be on the market? One of the guys in Boston. An Embiid for Jaylen Brown and Embiid for Jason Tatum.
I don't think Boston and Philly would ever do business together. But
they did business for Markelle Fultz. Nothing stopped them then. That's how Jason Tatum ended up on that team.
Yeah, because Boston saw they was taking Markelle Fultz. It was like, oh, why wouldn't we do this?
I would build around Ben Simmons. He's younger. He's a little bit more healthier, and his skill set, it looks like a Giannis type of skill set. If you put him with a true five and a true four out, where he's the one in type of guy in that dunker role. Even though still he had a terrible series where he looked like he was shot confidently and he was passing up on dunks
on Trae Young.
Yeah.
With Trae Young rotating. And that's my problem with Ben Simmons. I don't believe right now that you can trust Ben Simmons to be your leading guy for a championship team. He did have that crazy explosion on Rudy Gobert, but as we saw, Terrence Mann could drop 40 on Rudy Gobert. So to say that dropping 40 on Rudy Gobert is no longer as impressive as it was maybe 6 months ago. But the fact that he just seems to be uninterested in improving his game, he's actually regressed since he first came into this league.
I think
as a
he's
rookie.
the same player. That's
just as bad.
That's just as bad.
That's just as bad. Like the fact that at least he was more aggressive when he was a rookie, sophomore, attacking the basket. He was a guy who could get you 20-point.
A lot of those games Embiid missed. He plays better when Embiid misses games.
Fair too, but they weren't winning. And the problem with Ben Simmons is you're asking to build a team around him, and his biggest weakness is the ability to shoot the ball, shoot free throws. If the ball's going to be in his hands in the fourth quarter down the stretch of games, he's going to have to find a way to make shots from the outside, and I just don't believe he's interested in developing that part of his game at all. Which is why I would keep Joel Embiid, because Joel Embiid has already shown that he's not only willing to develop his game, but he shows out and can be dominant in the biggest moments outside of a terrible Game 5 against the Hawks. But the injury issues are definitely a problem when it comes to Joel Embiid. I think Ben Simmons definitely has a longer career ahead of him. But if you're trying to win right now, I think, especially with Daryl Morey being their guy, and he wants to be pace and space, shoot him out. I definitely think they're gonna have to find a way to trade Ben Simmons for some kind of shooter.
I don't see him trading Ben Simmons, because Ben Simmons could be a pace and space point guard. He just won't be doing the shooting. Joel Embiid doesn't fit pace and space. He doesn't fit pace and space. Though you gotta dump it down to him and let him go to work, and that's his best feature. So I mean, I don't know if they're,
and he could do that at a dominant level and carry a team doing that. I think him, Jokic, and maybe AD are probably the three guys in the league who can do that out of the post dominantly. And those guys, especially with his defensive abilities, those guys are still worth something.
But he's the only one that hasn't been to the conference finals. Even Jokic in the West has been to the conference finals.
That's absolutely fair. That's absolutely fair. I also think Joel Embiid's biggest problem is Ben Simmons being on the court. He needs to be on the court with four guys who can space the ball, who can shoot the ball from the perimeter. But with Ben Simmons being camped out in the dunker spot, with no one even caring to guard him, because you either just foul him if he attacks, or you just leave him alone because he refused to shoot the ball. That hurts Joel Embiid. But Joel Embiid showed the ability to produce despite Ben Simmons' weaknesses, which is why I think he's the guy that you should be banking it on. But none of those problems overcome the biggest problem that they actually have.
Hold up. We're also not going to let Tobias Harris off the hook.
He was up and down, but I feel as though he had an overall good series.
He had 4 points in one game.
Yeah, the game that the 25-point lead that they blew, they all had Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, they all had a hand in it, all of them.
He gets paid. I'm not letting max players off the hook. He's another guy that should be on the trade market, because he's one of those wing players that you got. So if you could trade him for a CJ McCollum, that can make their team better, just all the better too. But he has to be more consistent. He's one of those Paul George, Chris Middleton. Either you're getting 30 points or you're getting 4 points.
What about Doc?
And he's the big. He should have lost his job. I don't know why he's still there.
It's just it's year one, so it's just
the Indiana guy lost his job, and year after, lots of guys lose their job after 1 year. Some guys, like when the Lakers had the Dwight Howard year, lose their jobs in 10 games.
Yeah, if you're expecting a title, I would be okay with moving off from Doc Rivers. Just in my opinion, I think he's hit his wall. He's hit his wall. Like his era of basketball is over. And
what is his era of basketball? Having 4 Hall of Fame players?
And Tom Thibodeau is the defensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. Good for Doc Rivers. He got lucky one time.
And they won 3 7-game series in that playoff run.
And they'll be the hurt team in 6. Good for them. Congratulations on their one title in the last 40 years. Boston Celtics and Doc Rivers.
As soon as he left the Clippers, all of a sudden they were able to make it to the conference finals. The next coach we'll talk about. Actually, we'll get to the Clippers later.
We'll get to the Clippers later. But
next, we have to talk about
the Brooklyn Nets.
My Brooklyn Nets bowing out to the Milwaukee Bucks. And while I could blame the injuries to James Harden in 5 minutes into Game 1, which didn't help, the injury to Kyrie Irving, which I called would happen sooner or later because He's only finished 2 of his seasons ever in his career.
That's a shocking stat that you told me, but it actually makes perfect sense that you go back and think about
His
finals
in
run, his Cleveland run, the run when he was in Boston and got in.
That was one of the years he finished. The year that Boston went out in 5 to Milwaukee was one of the years he finished, and the year they won the championship.
Mm-hmm.
So the volatility with his career and his injuries have always been a problem. In his early days in Cleveland, he never finished seasons like that. We saw in 2015 when he didn't finish the season after he chased down, blocked Steph Curry. What a moment for him. But yeah, his injury this year, unfortunately, it was a freak injury where he went for shooting and he landed on somebody's foot.
Giannis, I think.
But apparently that only matters for jump shooting, not shooting layups. Even though he was shooting a little teardrop type of shot. The Nets still choked this series away.
Despite the injuries.
I'm looking at Joe Harris, who was the best 3-point shooter 2 out of the last 3 seasons in the NBA, and he was consistently making 1 for 7 3-pointers a night, including blowing the game in Game 3 when he had a wide open shot, the Bruce Brown game.
Yes, the Bruce Brown game. You always have to be worried about those role. The problem with you guys' injuries that you dealt with is that it forces you to rely more on role players to step up. And if you're relying on role players to be good, you're not going to win in today's NBA. Today's NBA is about stars.
Joe Harris makes $17 million a year.
Yeah.
To just make some wide open 3. He wasn't even getting contested better.
It's the playoffs. The moment's different. It's a different vibe. People are close. Now he did have more open shots in the Milwaukee series. He was just bad in that one. But it's just the playoffs are a different beast, and guys like Campaign, who we'll talk about later, step up. But then there are guys like Joe Harris, like Dennis Schroeder, where it's just like, oh, you're not built for this. You're not showing up.
In the Game 7, Steve Nash could have did a better job coaching, but
this is his first run. He had literally never been a head coach at any level ever. So the fact that he is y'all head coach is probably the reason why you did win the series. But that's what you guys want to go with because you guys don't want a head coach.
I mean, all he had to do was take a timeout. And James Harden shouldn't have been out there probably the last 2 games. And I was campaigning for him to be out there for Game 3. Because if he was out there for Game 3, we could have put him away in that game, and then maybe you could get to rest faster. Because in the end, he came back and he didn't even look good, and he had 1 decent game.
So, do you think you guys should run it back next year? Or
that brings me to the next trade candidate, which is Kyrie Irving. There's just too much offense on this team. If they could trade a Kyrie Irving for a Rudy Gobert, trade a Kyrie Irving for a Jeremy Grant, who's another trade player who didn't make the trade option, a player that didn't make the playoffs this year, another guy who does wing defending, rim running, and can guard on the perimeter, would be much more necessary because in the end of the day, Kevin Durant deserves to take a lot. Kevin Durant needs to be taking all the shots because he clearly is safe to go. He, in my opinion, established himself as the best player, at worst the second or third best player in the league, coming off that Achilles injury. He had that virtuoso Game 5, 49-point triple-double. And then we've got James Harden, who, of course, technically he did choke again.
Because that's what James Harden do. But he could get the injury excuse this year to give him a pass.
I guess injuries could get him through a pass this year. But I'd make everybody not, and Joe Harris. If you could get a wing defender or a combo guard to open up space to re-sign Spencer Dinwiddie or replace Spencer Dinwiddie, I could make Joe Harris available. I'd make everybody not named Kevin Durant or James Harden available to rearrange the option of this team because you're probably going to need to attach somebody to DeAndre Jordan to get rid of his $10 million off the book because he clearly has no value on the team anymore either.
Yeah, another one of those questionable. You always got to be careful when you're building try to put these super teams together because if you miss anywhere around the margins, the smallest mistake here and there can really pile up on you. Just bringing in DeAndre Jordan for that contract that's $10 million that y'all don't get to use. But the biggest problem with I think y'all have is that big threes are good when all the guys can play defense. But if you're going to be out there with 2 guys who are basically non-defenders, although James Harden and Kyrie seem to tried a little bit harder.
Kyrie Irving was impressive. Kyrie Irving had an impressive season. The 50-40-90, didn't see that coming. The 25 points per game ish, maybe 27. The defense was good, but in the end, he still was going to get hurt because he's a little small and fragile, and
he took as many breaks as he could to avoid it. But
yeah, and he's a little mentally unstable. So Kevin Durant's locked in, and all three are due to can opt out and become free agents next year. So they're gonna run it back probably, and it's gonna be make or break. Also, surprising comeback for Blake Griffin, who played surprisingly well. Detroit's probably sad to hear that. And also
a ton of pressure on you guys going into the next season.
Ton of pressure. They have to. It's a must win.
It's a must title. If y'all definitely be the favorite to come out the East, and probably the favorite to win the title overall, just because of the offensive talent y'all have. But if y'all don't get it done next year, that seems like another few years of darkness. Post Boston trade days are on the horizon.
Just pain. So that's it for the second round Cancun team.
Yep.
So we saw Ben Simmons, a guy that's going to probably be looking to get moved. Rudy Gobert, another guy might be looking to get moved. Who else? Tobias Harris, another guy looking to get moved. Maybe a Kyrie Irving, maybe a James Harden if the right piece becomes available to add to the list of the Dames, the Bradley Beals.
The guys who need to be saved. We all see the guys who need to be saved are going to be big time targets for teams who don't believe they can win a title. But we'll see who truly believes that and who doesn't.
And so that leads us to the conference finals.
I don't think there's a ton to talk about here. It's mostly the injuries change the course of the games.
Okay, so we had the Clippers making their first conference finals.
Congratulations to them. They can
hang that banner now.
They got 2 whole conference finals wins.
So we had them. I mean, they fought really well. Paul George had a couple good games.
They should have won the series if we're going to be completely.
For every good game Paul George had, he had 2 bad ones where he choked some free throws away and cost them 2 games single-handedly.
If Paul George makes 5 more free throws, the Clippers are playing in the conference in the NBA Finals tonight. Like, that's really how competitive the first 5 games of this series was. They looked like evenly matched teams, and that's without Kawhi Leonard even showing up. But I think we all that's probably the biggest reason why the Suns were able to overcome the Chris Paul COVID and then him trying to get back into shape. Is that the best player in that series didn't play a single minute of it, and that's really bad. It's really questionable for the Clippers. Kawhi has the ability to opt out this year, and apparently there's another report that he's upset with their team doctors because Kawhi don't like anybody's team doctors.
Uncle Dennis must be talking to him again. I'm another trade guy option added, Paul George. Maybe try to recruit some of the assets, all those unnecessary assets they gave up.
I think you only do that if Kawhi leaves.
And that's an option, and that's highly likely. If you even hear whimpers about Kawhi Leonard leaving, you have to do it before he leaves. So you aren't left holding the bag of just stuck with Paul George and people trying to lowball you.
Paul George did recruit some of that value, but the biggest guy, the guy who made the most money in that series,
campaign,
Mr. Reggie Jackson.
He can't make no more money. I think, like Blake Griffin, those guys are just showing that they're not.
Nah, man. Blake Griffin shows some good moments. Reggie Jackson averaged 20 points a game in these playoffs. Reggie Jackson looked like a guy who could be a third piece on a very good to championship contending team.
I hope nobody falls for that. But they're probably going to bring it back to Clippers if they can't get Spencer Dinwiddie or one of these point guards that are available.
Yeah, Reggie Jackson definitely looks like a guy who can run point guard for that team. The incredible shooting, his ability to attack off the dribble. He wasn't a complete liability on defense like he was in the bubble. Like a massive turnaround from Reggie Jackson as the wasteland of Russell Westbrook's backup point guards turned their careers around in one playoff series.
On the other side, we had Campaign, who was out of the league just a year ago, and he was dropping 30-point games. The most surprising thing of the playoffs.
Is he the most improved, like the most surprising player of the playoffs overall? By far.
By far. Campaign, did he even play for anybody?
I think he was on the Bulls.
He was on the Bulls. He was on OKC. And he never played for anybody and looked good. He looked amazing in the playoffs to the point where people were saying he deserved to be playing more than Chris Paul.
That's the biggest. As great as Chris Paul, as everyone wants to crown Chris Paul, they want to hand him a top 3 all-time point guard award. They want to hand him the Finals MVP. He's probably going to win a title, but the fact that Campaign has been every bit as good as him whenever Chris Paul hasn't been available or just wasn't on the floor has been a big part of why the Suns are still playing right now. They haven't lost a single beat when Campaign comes on the floor for Chris Paul. They actually
lost the game that he left early.
They actually play better or just more like what their team should be playing like when he's on the floor with their athletes and being able to push the ball with Devin Booker and Bridges and Ayton. It's just wow. Congratulations to Campaign on completely turning around his career and the narrative around him. He was just a dancing guy. Now he's a dude who who looks like he could be in for some new money.
He's going to be a backup. He looks like a career effective backup point guard, which is way more than he looked like when he was just Russell Westbrook's dancing pre-game dancing buddy. So for the Clippers, they're off to their darkness of questionable offseason.
And just the furthest they ever got. Ty Lue looks like the guy that can settle with that coach.
He saved his career because after the Cleveland days, people were throwing shade at him that he was getting carried by LeBron, but he actually looked like the second best coach in the playoffs in the Western Conference this year.
Yeah, I also think the coaches across from him gave him those opportunities, but
I mean, he believed in Terrence Mann enough.
He did. He believed in Terrence Mann, and the Jazz didn't, and that's why they're still playing. But if they get Kawhi to opt back in next year, they could easily bring back a similar roster. They're going to have to do something about their big man situation because clearly Zubac looked fine against Rudy, but
he's matchup dependent.
He's matchup dependent, and Serge Ibaka looks like he's about to bow out with the back problems.
Yeah, they really missed him.
They got nothing out of him. The entire playoff were just, yes, y'all remember Serge Ibaka? He basically didn't play after the month of March, but that was the same for a few guys.
Pat Bev is under contract. He was looking really good until Chris Paul started doing him up at the end of that Game 6. But for the Clippers, I mean, this is a big offseason because
they're another team who made big moves to go win a title, and they haven't produced one yet, and now they're coming to that pattern of either we get the title or we got to blow the whole thing up, and they're in that crossroads.
They gave up a lot of picks to get Paul George, an excessive amount of picks, and OKC probably hopes that Kawhi walks out the door and that turns their way because that could get really ugly really fast. Right, and so on to the Eastern side, we had everyone's prediction of the Atlanta Hawks and the Milwaukee Bucks. We had the Bucks coming through, even though their best player also got hurt and missed 2 games. But they're a better team. So
they were a better team regardless of. But despite the Giannis injury, we also the injury that affected the series the most was the Trae Young one. Like the Hawks looked every bit the equal of the Milwaukee Bucks, except outside of one blowout.
The game 2 looked pretty damning.
Outside of the one blowout game, but Philly had a blowout game on the Hawks too. But the Hawks are really good at bouncing back. They fought tough every time. Nate McMillan, a well-deserved contract extension for him. He definitely turned around the Hawks' entire season, their entire franchise. Like Trae Young was looking like just a guy, and now all of a sudden they look like a team that should be competing in the Eastern Conference for years to come.
Yeah, unfortunately he did get hurt stepping on the foot of a referee. That the most awkward injury to see.
Yeah, that's just a whimper of an ending for a coming out party for the Atlanta Hawks and Trae Young.
Chris Middleton finally showed up, surprisingly, as the one, and when he had to be the one, even though I do believe Drew Holiday was having the elite games, and they did have the Brook Lopez game. So They showed their depth. They have 3 all-star level players when they're at their best, but they're just all inconsistent, with the exception of Drew Holiday. He's consistently what he is. Chris Middleton, though, is one of those guys who you're either getting 30 or you're getting 4 for 16 performances. And Brook Lopez finally started playing like a big again.
I fully expect Chris Middleton to be bad tonight, by the way. It's game 1 Chris Middleton. So if 6 for 23, this seems like a lock.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a few. But yeah, guessing what Chris Middleton will do is pretty complicated, pretty risky guess.
And the thing about the Bucks is, without Giannis, they finally played the way Budenholzer wants to play. He wants to have his ISO score at the top of the key, spacing the floor out, like high pick and roll offense. But unfortunately, Giannis, who isn't elite at either of those things,
they choose to put the ball in his hands, and they played awkwardly with Giannis. They just put the ball in his hands and say, "Go get buckets."
I guess they're trying to develop that part. The fact that they're able to win while trying to develop the weakest part of Giannis' game is very impressive. But just imagine how dominant they would be if they just used Giannis as what he is,
a role guy, a pick and roll man who stands up, who stands in the dunker spot. I mean, they have the guys to get the spacing, but I guess not. Maybe he's questionable. He's gonna save his job, even though if Kevin Durant was one shoe size smaller,
he'd be fired already, probably. But that's the way. That's the difference. That's the difference in this basketball playoffs, man. It's just been crazy.
As for the Hawks, as they join the Cancun team, I mean, they got some questions now because they got Bogdanovich and they got their young guys, but they got John Collins who's up for a contract.
I don't think they extend him or bring him back.
They had exceptional depth, so it's gonna be weird if they start losing some guys because people always say that these guys are gonna be back, but then I always talk about the 2012 OKC Thunder, and then just find out, oh no, this can just get worse.
Can you trust Gallo to continue to be as good as he was during these playoffs?
He's getting older.
Lou Will gave him some good push this year, but we don't know how much longer that's going to
last. I was a big fan of Cam Reddish, and he showed up. He was playing in the end of the series.
Cam Reddish, you and I both thought could be a Paul George type of player, and DeAndre Hunter, who's
another really
good player for them.
Hopefully they can stay healthy, and that could help him replace the Gallinari production, and maybe the John Collins. Maybe they'll go more of a small ball type of lineup with Cam at the 3 or Hunter at 3.
Great trade for them getting Capella, though. The Capella trade looks like an absolute home run for them. The perfect fit for what they need to do.
Trae Young, yeah. Kevin Huerter had his breakout performance when he knocked out Philly.
Incredible depth for Atlanta. They like a team where if they just continue to take the right steps without trying to do anything drastic, they should be competing in the Eastern Conference for the next 5-10 plus years, just based off of the young talent they have and how far they've already made it.
They're gonna have to choose the right supporting cast guys because you're gonna have to keep either Bogdan or Herder. You're not going to keep both with then you're gonna have to choose between probably Hunter and Cam Reddish. So they have to make the right choices.
Yes.
And if you're just thinking John Collins is already out the door, I thought that'd be a guy they'd want to keep.
They like when Nate McMillan showed up, they significantly reduced John Collins' minutes and role with their team. They basically played him at the 4 when he's been his best as being a small ball 5. And maybe John Collins looks for a better opportunity elsewhere, and they don't want to pay the poison. Maybe they poison pill the contract, and they don't want to pay him like that.
I prefer to keep Collins and let Capella go.
I would too, but I don't know if that's what Nick McMillan wants to do.
Yeah, so I mean,
they got to
make the right decisions.
Great.
Yeah, they got to make the right. They have the talent there, but they just got. You can't keep everybody, so they're gonna have to make the right decisions and not lose. They don't want to come back in a few years lose a Joe Johnson type player when he left Phoenix and find out that we should have kept that guy.
Absolutely.
So that leads us to the finals preview.
The finals that everyone thought was going to happen.
The Milwaukee Bucks in their first final since 1974 is what the stat is.
Yep.
And the Phoenix Suns in their first finals since 1994. 93 or 94.
Yeah. This is also known as we moved off from Eric Bledsoe NBA Finals. Everybody, the two teams who have most recently moved off from Eric Bledsoe have finally gotten rewarded for it, and it says a lot.
Yeah. So I guess first of all, unfortunately, Giannis is doubtful for the night's game.
Yep.
And he's probably got an MCL sprain or one of those cartilage injuries. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be questionable to see if he comes back, and how they deploy playing. Are they going to continue to play the aggressive style of offense and defense they were playing in the last 2 games of the Hawks series?
They finally started switching.
Or will they go back to their coveted drop coverage and let Chris Paul have the Trae Young game one
that's the fear for the Bucks right now. The Suns run the exact type of offense and have the exact type of personnel to take advantage of the scheme that Mike Budenholzer likes to play on defense. They got guards who are very comfortable in the mid-range and pulling up, so they beat the drop coverage, and they got guys on the outside who are absolute snipers who can knock down. Even though Bridges did struggle throughout that conference finals against the Clippers.
He did calm down. He had some big games. That was DeAndre Ayton series against the Clippers, though. He played big in that one.
But that's probably the biggest and most important matchup of these finals. The Ayton versus Brook Lopez matchup. Because Ayton has absolutely feasted on just being completely left alone as a role man, because people are so concerned with of Chris Paul and Devin Booker that they have allowed Ayton to just get rebound putbacks, easy wide open dunks, and maybe a jump hook here and there. But Ayton has also had nothing but good matchups with Andre Drummond, Nikola Jokic, and Ivica Zubac.
Marcus
Morris. But you saw when the Clippers went small ball and hammered it, DeAndre Ayton struggled. But that won't be a problem in this one because we know Budenholzer's not going any small ball. But Brook Lopez is, unlike those other guys, a knockdown shooter from the outside.
So that should draw him out.
That draws him out the paint. how do you stop Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday from getting to the bucket at will?
I will say my X Factor matchup will be Chris Middleton versus, I guess, Jay Crowder / Devin Booker / Mikal Bridges. Because I'm going to go with my prediction. I do believe the Bucks there's a pathway for the Bucks to win this. I believe
does that pathway include Giannis not playing at all, or does Giannis have to come back?
Yeah, I believe they'll either steal one of the first 2 games, and then they'll get Giannis back for Game 3, and hope to hold home court there because they play elite at home, and then try to steal the next home game and winning 6. That's the path that I think Milwaukee can use to win this series. If they play like they did the last 2 games against Atlanta without the drop, they can't play that drop. If I see the night that they're playing drop coverage and Chris Paul hits a couple mid-range jumpers, I'm going to be feeling really disappointed by my prediction and my bet that I placed on them to finish it out. But I do believe that if they could get Giannis back by Game 3 and steal a game, they could close it out in 6.
The Suns have home court, right?
Yes, they do.
The game
so,
Phoenix.
So that's that might be the blessing that keeps them from forcing Giannis to come back, because they might be like, okay, we could lose the first 2 games on the road and then bring him back for Game 3. Because I don't think he'll be back until Game 3 unless they get embarrassed tonight and they hit the panic button and bring him back. But I will go with Bucks in 6. But if Phoenix win, I do think they'll have to fight it out. They did not look very impressive against the Clippers, and I don't think the Clippers look that good.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Ever since they completely annihilated the Denver Nuggets, their level of play has slowed down. Luckily for them, the injuries on their opponents have allowed their lesser play to still be good enough to win. Now, for me, with the Giannis injury, I'm going to pick the Suns in 7. This because the only reason I'm going to pick and go that far is because I don't think the Suns can win in 5, but I don't think they close out Milwaukee in Milwaukee, because I do expect Giannis to be back at some point. But I think they do win both of these games at home if Giannis doesn't play, and I think that will be enough for them to just find a way to win 2.
Win all the home
game, and find a way to just win a couple, because we know the Bucks are great at home, and the Bucks without Giannis seem to be a more even matchup for the Suns than the Bucks with Giannis, which is absolutely crazy to think about because the Suns have home court, and but the Suns don't have anybody to slow down Giannis. Like, if Giannis gets out there and Brook Lopez
and the thing is, you don't even have to abuse him. You just use him. Cut his play time down 85% to 85% of what you're using, and just make sure you get 85% of that effective minutes, and then go to Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis and for the rest of us, because they have size. So
they have size to combat Phoenix, but they also have good, strong defenders, bigger guys that can, like Drew Holiday's bigger than.
Another question: who do you think Drew Holiday will primarily guard? This is like that Portland series from a few years ago. Chris Paul.
I think he takes Chris Paul. I think P.J. Tucker probably gets the Devin Booker assignment, if I had to guess. But because I think Middleton would be relied too much on offense to have to go chase Devin Booker around screens all day. But yeah, I think Drew Holiday, I think they're going to want to cut the head off the snake. And I think that's how you're going to be able to take down bigs. Drew Holiday has to be locking up Chris Paul, making life very difficult on him, not just giving up mid-range jumpers all day. And if they do that, and if they slow Chris Paul's production down and allow them to be able to focus their attention on Devin Booker, I think it makes it really hard on Phoenix. But that's easier said than done, and we also don't know if Budenholzer will even employ that strategy, because I don't trust Budenholzer. I trust Monty Williams significantly more than I trust Mike Budenholzer, which is the reason why I'm going to take the Suns in this series, because the Bucks do have a better team.
It is. The problem is none of these guys have been here before, so I don't know what to expect. But I'm pretty sure we'll have at least one big Drew Holiday game. We'll have one big Chris Middleton game. We'll have a giant Devin Booker game. And for all the big guys, we'll have at least one exceptional game, a Chris Paul game. But now we're just relying on, will we see a Brook Lopez game? Will we see a Jay Crowder game? Will we see a Mikal Bridges game, a DeAndre Ayton game, a Bobby Portis game, a Pat Connaughton game? Will we see a Brett Forbes game, because he finally got back into the lineup last series? I'm sure it'll be at a competitive series. Will it be the Nets-Lakers, the Nets-Clippers, the Sixers-Lakers, the Sixers-Clippers series that we were all hoping to see?
Even Bucks-Lakers.
Even Bucks-Lakers and Bucks-Clippers? No, it won't.
But have you ever been less excited for a finals?
Yeah, the year that Golden State was playing the bad LeBron James, the non-Kyrie Irving.
But even then, you were like, LeBron James is good enough by himself to at least carry him to make it interesting. But I can understand that. I can understand that.
As that series was an easy sweep, as everybody saw coming, because his second guy was Tristan Thompson and Kyle Korver and Kevin Love. That wasn't going to do it. So I'll go Bucks in 6. You go Suns in 7. So we'll get a competitive series. It's going out for 2 weeks. stretched out as far as it can. So
someone's gonna get their first title. So congratulations to one of these teams that's gonna get their first title.